All right, all right. Good morning, buenos dias, Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert, and friends all over the world. It's Tuesday. You know what that means. You see him. Look at that handsome guy. Time
Morning.
for Charles and Jeffon.
Yes.
As we continue to explore our lovely book and continue to be stirred and expanded, and awakened. And I hope that's the truth for all of us. So good morning. It's Tuesday here in the Valley. It's very smoky. Are you getting all the smoke in where are you? You're at Sam, where are you?
Yeah, Redlands. So right by San
Redlands.
Bernardino. Yep.
Redlands,
So
yeah.
it is smoky. I mean,
It's
eerie kind of a feel out here right now.
Eerie's. It's a word I've heard. Up back in Seattle too. I got a voicemail from my mom this morning. That's there's some fires, I think, in northeastern Washington. It's just crazy right now. There's a lot of fire going on. So
Yeah.
let's all of us. Just a reminder to me. I read kind of the silliest, but I don't know, wackiest thing yesterday, that a lot of fires are being started by people that go up into the hills and do gender reveal celebrations. Like when, we're going to have a baby. And I saw that some fire was started, I think, was it Northern California or something like that, because some sort of spark happened from a gender reveal ceremony when people are out in the wilderness. I just thought that was the wildest thing.
Rip Charles, that was actually the fire very close to me in Yucaipa.
Oh, so you saw that too?
Yeah. So it's now 10,000 acres.
Wild. Well, it's just it's a reminder to me for all of us to be mindful, safe and mindful of what we're doing, being out there. I know certainly it's important for folks here in the desert to beat the heat, to go find higher elevations, go up into the mountains and things like that. So let's just all remind each other how important it is to be safe out there, because it's just the fire in itself, but also just the air quality, and people makes it challenging for folks to breathe too. So let's take care of each other, huh?
Yeah. It's really a reminder of how intricate everything is. I mean, even when we're up in the hills or in mountains, the life that we're sharing that experience with, whether it's trees or plants or animals, and really embracing that concept of walking as if your feet are kissing the earth, and acknowledging that, and we're a part of it. We're not trying to, while we can escape and get away, I mean, we should do so in a reverent fashion and appreciating the nature and the life around us, even if it is 115.
Amen. I think we got to 122 earlier or over the weekend, something like that.
Wow.
Wild heat. You look fresh. You look good.
Yeah. I, as I mentioned to you prior to jumping on, I rented a car and drove to Salt Lake City. My wife and I were planning to go, and she ended up having to stay back. So I just went for the weekend. And being that there are no salons open currently that I know of here, or barbershops, I went to my friend in Salt Lake and told him, let's chop it down. Get the weed whacker out. Let's chop it down, and we'll let it grow back in case we're not opened again for the next 8 months. And by that time, I'll be in need of another one. So
yeah, right on. Speaking of Salt Lake City, let's jump into this. So chapter 9 is all about color. Another fascinating chapter. The author, I love the research that he does, but also his self-reflection. There's a depth to his self-reflection that's wonderful. So I'll start with a confession. When I think Salt Lake City, it's so interesting. I think like Whitesville. That might be a racist tendency of mine. Just a way that I do something to a city in my head. And I think people used to think that about Seattle too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so interesting. And of course, I know there's not only white people that live in Salt Lake City, but it's a way that I've been like programmed through my travels and my journeys in life. It's interesting that that's one of my thoughts is Salt Lake City, and it's connected to the Mormon church somehow.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, I'm aware of that I'm aware of that.
It's interesting because if you recall, Rip Charles, last week when we concluded our time, we kind of mentioned this idea of recognizing when we'll attach a particular behavior to a person based upon what a group does, or I mean, attach an individual's behavior to an entire group,
Mhm.
and catching ourselves where we fall out of line, where we're kind of not honestly seeing everybody from this inherent level.
Yep.
And so I was practicing that in Salt Lake, because that's where I'm from, and I didn't want to burden anybody with staying at their house, especially coming from what they consider a hotspot of COVID.
Mm.
So I just rented I had a hotel downtown, and there is a large homeless population and opiate addiction that
Mm.
is just ravaging throughout Salt Lake City and impacting countless people. And so I was, seeing there were a lot of homeless people kind of where I was staying, and I was catching myself in a habitual fashion. I would think particular things like, okay, be careful, what's happening, and I tried to then obviously be aware, and I'm not walking around at like 2 a.m., but being aware of like, can I am able to recognize the worth of this individual, even if they are walking around with many bags, you know, maybe strung out on something, or seeking their next hit. I can still honor and recognize them. So I can detach the behavior of what I perceive to be a homeless addict, which people in my family have been that. I can detach that group behavior and honor the individual. And then also, kind of to this colorism idea, and color idea. In
Yep.
Salt Lake, I always drive by the neighborhood where I was raised, which is a predominantly white community, white affluent community. And I'd always drive by where the house my grandpa built, the road that I was riding my bike on when I was a kid. And I can still feel certain feelings associated with that area that, and I haven't been there for decades.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating exercise to kind of walk through.
Totally. Did you notice, did you have a tendency, were you being particularly mindful of witnessing the divinity in the homeless folks? Did you notice any tendency to judge or that think they're less than, or so were you trying to discipline yourself, or how did that play out inside of you?
Yeah, well, I think there's a habitual and often unconscious pattern that I will go through, where I will judge people of
Yeah,
all kind. And
me too. Me too.
so trying to catch myself first, be aware of when I'm doing it, and then honor and recognize that divinity. And then suddenly it seemed as if in those moments there was no there was no finger pointing, there was no shame for myself feeling a certain way. And I was able just to experience them as they're probably experiencing me in that particular moment. And also knowing, just thinking about my life, there are people in those individuals' lives who love them deeply,
Mm.
who
Mhm.
care about them.
Yes.
And how dare I allow a image of them at that moment completely strip away all the compassion or beauty or love or inherent worth that is dwelling within them, whether in their brightest moment or not their brightest moment. And I'm not the judge of that. But again, that is another, I mean, spiritual practice, as you said, is like praying without ceasing, meditating with our eyes wide open, and being in a moment, and being able to do that continuously is a real practice.
Amen. Amen. And I want to remind the folks that are tuning in today that we love to hear from you. So comments, questions for myself or Jeffon, we welcome that. You know, as you're talking, Jeffon, it kind of sparks something in me. I wonder if I've noticed this before, that my lack of willingness to actually recognize my racist tendencies, it perpetuates the issue, and it's actually shrouded in good intention. Like somehow, less lately because I'm committed to doing my work, but certainly historically, if I, it's a spiritual bypass. If I say or pretend that because it's the spiritual thing to do or whatever, to not acknowledge my racial tendencies, racist tendencies, perpetuates the issue. And he has a line in here, and I don't know if it's one of your slides, so forgive me if I'm jumping ahead or stepping on your toes, that the car that's driven by good intentions, the racist car driven by good intentions, will go as far as the anti-racist car will.
Hmm.
Do you remember that line? You know,
Yeah.
so So I think, and I just think sometimes because it's the thing to do is to not be racist, that somehow I've noticed that I pretend not to be racist because I don't want to acknowledge the ways that I am, but that just perpetuates the issue. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I'm trying to get a thought out. Do you follow me?
Yeah. So, and correct me if I'm kind of interpreting this wrong, but the idea of at times being unwilling to confront the areas that may need to begin to grow within ourselves is the thing that perpetuates the very issue that we're trying to resolve and or flee from.
Yep.
So for instance, also with the homelessness issue, I didn't until this conversation right now begin to connect the dots of the racial groups that I would see out there predominantly on the street, though it's a variety of individuals, but then taking it a step further and say, well, not what decisions did this individual do or not do, but what were the things that were set in place prior to this individual even picking up a drug of choice? And how may that have formed or opened a doorway or led them down a particular path, or their family prior to them even taking their first breath? And that is another thing I know around alcoholism in particular neighborhoods, drug abuse, and it does not look, addiction will hit all people of all backgrounds in many different ways, but we also can take that a step further and recognize particular policies that continue to perpetuate that cycle.
Right. Like even the difference between and I don't know where it stands now, but I know historically there have been different sentencing guidelines for powder cocaine versus crack. And one's predominantly inner city, more urban, one's more suburban, and so that equates to white and black, so, and that's a policy. It's so, yeah.
Yeah. So
awakening to those things, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a deep thing. And then encompassing all of this into principle is an opportunity for us to begin to continuously reflect on the one from which we are, and also the ways in which we have subconsciously or unconsciously prevented ourselves from seeing the one everywhere we may be. And
amen.
Yeah, so kind of wanted to put that out there.
You want to do a Sunday sermon soon? I'm going to give you a Sunday sometime soon. Another one. I know you and Dr. Joe had, what's that?
I enjoy it.
Yeah, you do. And you're not only are you good at it, but you come from a particular consciousness. So, and that conversation you and Dr. Joe had was great. When was that now? Was that back in April?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I think April or maybe May. Yeah, May. It was after George Floyd.
After George, yep. Local minister snaps.
Yeah.
I hope this sabbatical has helped heal Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe, if you're listening, we love you. You know that.
Yes, we do.
Let's get into it.
All right. Let's start with some of this here. So this conversation, this particular chapter that we're going through on how to be an anti-racist by Dr. Kendi is focused on color. And this is a particular concept that I have had to come face to face with, recognizing the privileges that my lightness also often affords me when I'm around individuals, friends, family who may be of a darker complexion. So let's kind of get these ideas out of the way. And as always, if you have comments, questions, ideas you would like us to discuss, please share them in the comments. So he begins the chapter by simply saying colorism, what it is and what it is not, or how to be an anti-racist towards that particular concept. So colorism is a powerful collection of racist policies that lead to inequities between light people and dark people, supported by racist ideas about light and dark people. Color anti-racism is a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to equity between light people and dark people, supported by anti-racist ideas about light and dark people. That's kind of a lot of words there, but Rev Charles, have you noticed through your experience this concept of colorism, either directly or indirectly?
Well, yes, and I'm aware that my experience of it is not nearly as impactful as other people's experience of it has been.
Yes.
I mean, it's more of like a personal shame and embarrassment. And what I mean is, underneath this shirt, I mean, I've got golfer's tan for days. There is a white body underneath these clothings, right? So I go hang out with my friends and I take my shirt, out on my buddy's boat, and inevitably, well, dang, Charles, you haven't been out in the sun very much, have you? And then people will laugh, or there's comments like that. But that's how I've experienced it. And then I just kind of feel like some shame.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like too white, I'm supposed to be somehow tanner or look a different way, or and I know that so, and then so then what happens is there's no life or death or complex scenario that comes out of that. It's just more my experience of it, and and I guess that's even within the white community that I within the white community. I know he talks a lot about within the Black community, light and dark, but I guess it just kind of reflects too, even within the white community, kind of a hierarchy of whiteness versus tan. So, I mean, that's mostly my experience with it. Have I witnessed it in other people? Yes. Mm-hmm. Being having been exposed to the Black community for most of my life and things like that. Have I seen in high school, within the sports community, light skin, dark skin, right, darker skin, like the yellow bone thing or whatever. I've heard that plenty of times.
Right.
I've witnessed it happen. So those are really my experiences with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeffon?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when I was young, being that I kind of found myself in this interesting gray zone, in Salt Lake. I was like not white enough, but I also wasn't dark. I wasn't extremely dark, but I was darker than, pretty much everybody around. And there was this part of me that really, really clung to, or tried to cling on to my my father's side, my African American side. So I wanted to be darker. Mm-hmm. And I remember in the winter when I wouldn't be in the sun and I would get a little bit lighter, and I couldn't wait to kind of get back into summer so I would be a little bit more darker than I don't know. But then I also began to see how, from my perspective, how people would be interacting with me in comparison to some of my friends who were lighter skinned. And then when I moved to Seattle, it was a little bit different because it's a much more diverse group of individuals in that city. And then, as I mentioned in our conversation in the past, moving to Atlanta was when I really started to see firsthand the privileges that were afforded to me because of the complexion of my skin and also the way that I talk. That which we talked about in the past, the proper or not proper. And regardless of how hard I tried to speak how my friends spoke, it was I could not. I just sounded foolish. I wasn't raised like with those type of lingo. I could embrace some of it, but so colorism is something that is important. And recently I've been trying to make it a point that if I am around individuals, my friends, my family, who are darker than me, and the whole focus is shifting towards myself or somebody who is of a lighter complexion, I will always try to open up the conversation or redirect it to them. Because it seems as if even in recent Black history, Malcolm X was lighter complexion. Angela Davis, who was with the Black Panthers, was a lighter complexion. Huey Newton was lighter complexion. And so there were a lot of light-skinned individuals who had an opportunity to be a voice of a large group of African American people. And it's not more, and even, it's not as, I just want it to be an equal representation. And by no means can I speak for an entire race. And by no means should I have more opportunity because of the way that I look. And that's something that I've been working within my own experience.
Yeah, right on.
So with that said, you know how we can go. We can talk about things for
Well,
quite.
yeah.
Yeah, it's important. It's really,
Well,
really important.
we could, and that's why I said just anyway. Yeah, let's keep on rolling. I'm very interested in your slides and your takeaways. So let's roll.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And if somebody out there who is listening, tuning in, has experienced colorism, please share, or if what your take on it is. I mean, that's always beneficial. It's not just what Rev Charles or myself say is true.
Absolutely.
That's just
We
our
want.
experience.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. Absolutely.
Definitely. So, if you recall, in one of the earlier chapters, he talks about this concept of a dueling consciousness. And the way he kind of phrased it at the beginning of this chapter was really fascinating. With he wore his cornrows, but
Yeah.
also wore colored contacts.
Yeah.
And and so there was this dueling consciousness of wanting to be black, but didn't want to look black, as he put it. And the whole identity, or at least this concept, was wrapped around in this post-racial beauty ideal, which is lightness. And the race of a lighter skin and eyes and straighter hair, thinner noses, on and on, is perceived as biracial or racially ambiguous, which ultimately, as he put it, white beauty repackaged with dark hair.
Mm.
And to recognize colorism, we first must recognize that light people and dark people are two distinct racialized groups shaped by their own histories. And it's funny that the way in which we subconsciously or unconsciously think of beauty and how that has been programmed in our mind from a very young age.
Yep.
Anything you want to touch upon there?
I just continue to be, as I think about how do we heal this, or how do we unpack it? How do we unpackage it and start to go in a new direction? I just continue to be. I mean, this is like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years longer, probably, of programming, of programming, right? Of getting to where we are, and he keeps coming back. I mean, it's just that's I just keep thinking about that when I'm reading this, is how did we get here? Not I guess I mean, I understand how. I don't understand all the stories or all the policies by any stretch. I get how, but and then now here we are. I don't know what I'm trying to say, except
It's a deep program.
it's a deep, deep program. And I love this line just above that too, on that same page 109, Jeffon. He said, I never asked myself the anti-racist question, why? Why do I think lighter eyes were more attractive on me? What did I truly want? That why question.
Yeah.
And that starts, I think when we do that, it starts to kind of unpack things. You know, he was talking about his honey, you know, the contacts and things.
Right.
And I think so little, and I think we're starting to do it more, is ask that question, well, why? You know, why do I behave like this? Why is this my preference? And to really drill down into it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing how much we often do to run away from the true uniqueness of who we are. And we will try to mask it in a variety of fashions, whether we are conscious of it or unconscious of it. And there's something powerful that is revealed when we accept the fullness of our being, and realizing that many of these things that we try to put on ourselves, or mask what we think are these deep wounds, that's actually like our beauty and blessings and our gifts and our impact. I mean, when I first moved to Seattle, I didn't want anybody to know I was from Salt Lake, because the idea that I had was like, oh, this is like some Mormon kid. I mean, there's no black people there. I mean, he's probably just a white kid, you know?
So what I said to start the show was something that that was our dance in consciousness then, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like my idea about Salt Lake, and then your
was also what my idea of Salt Lake. And I would just tell people I was from California. And I remember when I finally reached a point where like I embraced it, because I would never share stories about my family, my mom who struggled with drugs and addiction when I was young, my father's and myself not having, but that actually became the very blessings, those seemingly dark moments in my life, sometimes prolonged periods, became the very the blessings that then helped nourish me, and now I can share and impact other people in profound ways. So, but I was masking it with
Yeah.
baggy clothes, backwards hats, sagging my pants, uh, you know, going into school, doing well in school, but I didn't want anybody to think I was like this smart kid in college. I wanted to maintain this image that I thought was who I had to be, which was a small sliver of who I truly am.
Amen. Well said. Yeah. Amen. Did a couple comments come in, Jeffon? Did I see a couple
Yeah.
things show up?
Yeah. So when or how, or I don't know what that says. When
I
or
think that might
how.
be somebody's. Is that somebody's name?
Oh, maybe it is. Yep. When or how. Okay. So much of this,
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
do you think has to do with ethnic majority in a given country? White beauty is also a thing like in places like South America, India, China, Africa, etc. So first question, do you think that this has to do with ethnic majority in a given country that kind of sets the standards of beauty and or what people want to look like?
Is that assimilationism? Will that be something like hold
Assimilation.
on. Well, I don't know. Let's see. No, I think it's okay. That's not a name, Jeffon.
Yeah.
Wonder how much of this do you think has to do with ethnic majority in a given country? Well, I think it's connected probably with that and with power, Jeffon. What do you think?
Yeah. And I mean, we
If
have
what ethnic group has power?
and has had power throughout a span of at least our modern history.
Mm,
Remember the saying that the sun never sets on the British Empire? And it
mm,
means like they colonized all these locations. Same with the French, same with the um, German, a variety, Belgium, and these were all Eurocentric countries. And therefore, when they started colonizing particular places, they set the standard of this racial hierarchy, which made the superior be those who are the conquerors, the colonizers. And so I think that that is ingrained very deeply. And to the second question, white beauty is a thing in South America, India, China, Africa. I know in South America, or excuse me, in Central America, in Honduras, I think I mentioned this. My friends who are Garifna, which are the Africans there on the coast, through Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, Costa Rica, the African, they have their own language, but they are treated in such a horrible fashion in compared to the Spanish, which were the colonizers in that area.
yep.
So that they'll just simply in a bus, they won't even stop and pick up at times older black people, and they'll just
Mm,
laugh and drive by. And
yep.
I look Spanish there, so they, and so also in India, they're in a little bit later in this chapter, he talks about the skin bleaching regimen that people go through. In China, I notice a lot of my friends who are Asian Americans, they definitely cover up in any sun. They
Yep.
do not want to be extremely dark complex. Maybe that's my thought that I have. And
Yeah.
Africa as well. I mean, people bleaching their skin. So it's a deep thing.
It's a deep thing all over the world. And he talks about specifically too, since you brought, I mean, he talked about Filipinos as well, dark skin versus light skin, Filipinos. You know, it's interesting. It has to do with color somehow, but it also has to do with the system. My daughter's mom, my partner in parenting, Julia, her mom, so her first language is Spanish, and
Mhm.
she's a brown Mexican woman. She's looks like what she looks like, but she specifically made a point of and she's a professor, she's Dr. Julia Rosa Emsley, a very accomplished woman. She's run colleges. Well, I think I called her and her sister, they do a lot of work in immigration reform and things like that. I call the two of them the Brown Panthers. They're militant. I love, we have the most fascinating conversations when we sit down, anyway, she specifically made a point of learning to speak English sounding without an accent that English isn't your first language.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? So she could quote unquote beat the system. And I remember hearing that because it's so ingrained, she actually had a game plan of how to beat the system by speaking very, very clear English. How does that speak to colorism? I don't know, except probably that if she sounded like English was her second language, that maybe it would be attached to her color as well, and she wouldn't be afforded the opportunities that were given to her. I don't know. We haven't gone way down the rabbit hole, but that's interesting too.
Yeah, it really is. And there's a study that just came out around the gender inequities that exist from male to female, and then it segmented from white women, Latinx women, Black women, and the varying degrees of those disparities within those particular subgroups. It is a very revealing thing that I would encourage everybody just to search out and see. It's fascinating.
What's the study called? Is it a paper published, or do you know how do people find it?
It was a paper published. It's just, I think it's income disparities based, like women income disparities 2020. It was it just came out probably 3 weeks ago. And
it's based on gender. It's based on gender. Jeffon?
Yep, on gender. And Hispanic women, I think, don't quote me, but if I remember correctly, make 46 cents to every dollar a white man makes. That's the lowest in the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And white women make 72 cents to every $1 that white men make.
Yeah.
So
we've got a lot of growth to do. Is there another comment that came up?
Various ways. Yes. Carrie said, I'm working here in the desert in a large organizations. There are Hispanic and many people of color, and in all levels except the very highest. When I started, it was so noticeable. Now it's normal. But at first I knew it was not norm around the US. I did bring up to me inner feelings and self-knowledge of what I am most comfortable with. So working here, large organization, a lot of Hispanic people of all color and all levels except high levels of management. You know what's fascinating? When I have the opportunity to do work with organizations, we have a conversation about diversity and inclusion, but it usually stops at this invisible line. And the invisible line is usually the executive level of the organization. And it's like, yeah, from here down, we need to work on diversity and inclusion. But look, from here up, and it's predominantly white men sitting in a circle, we have it all figured out. And yeah, it's like,
make us more money, please. Let's get a group of folks together, but make us some more money.
Yeah. Don't talk about us. Talk about the people who we're leading and managing. So it's a fascinating concept to think about.
Yeah, right on. What was the last part of the statement that Carrie made?
So when I started, it was so noticeable. Now it's normal. But at first I knew it was not the norm around the US. I did bring it up. It did bring up inner feelings and self-knowledge of what I am most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do you begin to address that? I mean, how do you begin to have conversations in various settings around where you notice that exclusion exists and or people are favored because of the complexion of their skin?
You know what I've found whenever I want to find out about somebody is a genuine seeking to understand begins with questions. They're questions asked, that come from as much of a place of neutrality as possible. And then when someone feels safe, they actually feel safe to start talking a little more in depth about what's really going on. Mm-hmm. So I think, even with, this whole concept or idea of managing up instead of just managing up with questions, whatever those questions are, but a genuine and earnest conversation about things being the way they are and an inquiry into it and a seeking to understand, a real listening. Because people aren't, when we just go in and start bulldozing with our opinions or our views, people may listen, but out of intimidation.
Right.
Rather than a dialogue about something.
Yeah.
I found it starts with questions, a real inquiry.
Yeah. And I think kind of touching on one of the points that you mentioned a little earlier was at times, the conversation about racism or inequity and the ways in which we may keep it in place can be extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it is easier to say that you are very well intentioned and to completely ignore behaviors that may or may not produce those levels of inequities that we say we're against.
Yep. Amen.
So with that said,
let's keep rocking and rolling.
Slide number 3.
It's 10:35, Jeffon. How do we
I
do
know.
this every week? What's going on?
It's a good conversation.
It's a good conversation. All right.
So this is on page 110, 111.
Okay.
Rev Charles, you kind of touched upon something here, which I'll bring up too, but it said colorism, like all forms of racism, rationalizes inequities with racist ideas, claiming the inequities between dark people and light people are not due to racist policy, but are based in what is wrong or right with each group of people. Colorist ideas are also assimilationist ideas, encouraging assimilation into or transformation into something close to the white body.
Mm.
Anti-dark colorism follows the logic of behavioral racism, linking behavior to color, is what the studies show. Inequities between light and dark African Americans can be wide as inequities between Black and white Americans. And that was where he said on the bottom of page 110, top of page 111, where he talked about, maybe because racist Americans have higher expectations for lighter students, people tend to remember educated Black men as light-skinned, even when their skin is dark. It is why employers prefer light Black men over dark Black men, regardless of qualifications. Even dark Filipino men have lower incomes than their lighter peers in the United States. Dark immigrants to the United States, no matter their place of origin, tend to have less wealth and income than light immigrants. When they arrive, light Latinx people receive higher wages, and dark Latinx people are more likely to be employed at ethnically homogeneous job sites. It's a fascinating, it is really, really a fascinating thing. And then he touches upon, dark sons and light daughters receive higher quality parenting than light sons and dark daughters.
So
And
yep.
yeah, and I mean, skin color influences perceptions of attractiveness or not, and that is something that is I hear often in various communities that I'm a part of, is this conversation of light and dark in terms of various people and how they may appear to be attractive or not appear to be attractive based upon the color of their skin.
Yep. Based upon the cut and the shade, the color. I mean, like literally the shade.
The shade, yeah, based upon the shade, the complexion of the skin.
And I want to read this this paragraph too, back on page 110, Jeffon, which I just kind of wrapped a circle around the entire paragraph. To be an anti-racist is to focus on color lines as much as racial lines, knowing that color lines are especially harmful for dark people. When the gains of a multicolored race disproportionately flow to light people and losses disproportionately flow to dark people, inequities between the races mirror inequities within the races.
Yes.
But because inequities between the races overshadow inequities within the races, dark people often fail to see colorism as they regularly experience it. Fish in water kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So again, he's just saying to drill down into within races as well. How is racism showing up?
Right.
Colorism, as he calls it, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. I have that wrapped around too.
Yeah.
That's a powerful paragraph there.
And also, therefore, dark people rarely protest policies that benefit light people. A skin color paradox is termed by political scientist Jennifer Hochschild and Vesla Weaver. So, because there's a lack of awareness about it.
Yeah. So, it's fascinating, and this is just me thinking here. I wonder if there's this part that's like, well, we're moving forward. I think of like Obama when he was elected. He's light skinned. Um, and I cannot speak for an entire group of people, but you know, we're moving forward in terms of somebody who is even biracial in office at the highest level of presidency. But I remember having a conversation and somebody asked, "Do you think that America is ready for a black
Mm.
American as president?" You know,
Like dark skin. That's
yeah,
what you're saying, right?
yeah,
Dark
yeah,
skin.
not you know, well, you know, and as we move through this chapter, he kind of touches upon, let me see if I have it up here.
Yeah.
Um, he kind of touches upon, you know, the drop rule on page 113 and color hierarchy also that the author, Dr. Kendi, was talking about. But the drop rules of racial purity were mirages, just like races themselves and the idea of racial blood. No racial groups was or are pure. And if we think about that, I mean, in my history, it is my mom is from Scotland, my dad is from Africa, or you know, African American. My grandparents, obviously from Mississippi and Arkansas, but prior to that, from across the Atlantic. But
Mm.
even through all of this, I mean, there's so many things that have been brought together to allow us to be here. So there's this thread that flows, and it's not just one or the other. I mean, we're encompassing. And then if we take it to spiritual principle, we are of the same essence.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So,
That's what I have to say.
yeah.
Yes. Hi, Munchkin. What's happening?
I'm just getting this because I need it right now.
You want to weigh in?
You have a lot of ideas. I know you do. Hello.
Hello.
Go back to school. Get skipping school. Get in there. Learn. I love it. The first half of her day is all in Spanish, and the second half is in English.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome.
Oh,
So,
was that another comment that came in, Jeffon, right there? I don't. How many more slides do you have? Do you have quite a few still?
no, I have 4. No,
Okay,
I have
okay.
actually 3.
Okay.
I have about 30. We're doing all right. Yeah, there was another comment that just popped in. Adair, when I worked at the Chicago Tribune, owned at the time by the Colonel Robert McCormick family, the entry-level jobs were held by all races, but the management levels were noticeably Irish. There is more than color that affects this dynamic in companies.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that.
I get it too.
That's a really great point.
Yep. Preference
Yeah,
based on culture as well, or what would you call that? Countryism, nationalism.
nationalism. And a simple concept is people often will prefer to promote and advance their mere image. So they will naturally, at times, gravitate towards individuals who have the same political affiliation, the same type of religion, a similar background, maybe went to the same university, knows people that they know. And so they're man, that would be a great person for a management role. Seeing themselves in them in some way. And if you bring in another person from a different background, another race, a variety of things, and suddenly that may not fully be afforded to everybody at a equal way, so to say.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to touch upon these, Rev Charles, and then we can kind of bring it to a conclusion.
Bring it home. Cool.
I always like when he brings in the concepts of, so what is anti-racist and how can we embrace it? So on page 114, he said, to be an anti-racist is not to reverse the beauty standard. To be anti-racist is to eliminate any beauty standard based on skin and eye color, hair texture, facial and bodily features shared by groups. To be anti-racist is to diversify our standards of beauty, like our standards of culture or intelligence, to see beauty equally in all skin colors, broad and thin noses, kinky and straight hair, light and dark eyes. To be anti-racist is to build and live in a beauty culture that accentuates instead of erases our natural beauty.
Yes.
That is a powerful, some powerful ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've got that underlined too, Jeffon. It's the work that we're called to do.
Yeah.
It's the work. It's these ideas, even if we just took the definitions at the start of each chapter and use that as fodder for our inner work to reprogram ourselves to be born again, to make ourselves new, is a wonderful, just to take, how many chapters are there? So there's whatever, but just to take those two sets of ideas. He doesn't necessarily have two for each one. Sometimes he only has one in the start of the chapters, but to take those ideas and just begin to work with those to simplify things as much as possible, I think is a great platform for us to leap off of.
I agree because the book, while it's powerful, ideas often begin to move into motion when we as individuals put them into action.
That's right.
There was another comment that popped in.
Yep.
Carrie, I do believe charisma is so important and will transpire all other concerns. So the person who is speaking a real universal truth will be embraced, color or gender. Charisma is impactful, is important.
What if you hate Jeffon? What if you have a dark-skinned person and a light-skinned person, and they're both equally as charismatic? Then what? That would be my question.
Yeah, I mean, and that's at times where we'll default to our deeper programming that at times we don't really know is running a low hum beneath the surface until we're confronted with a situation like that.
Yep. Low hum.
Yeah.
So you fired up.
Yeah, right. The low hum only exists because we give it power, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Amen.
So this is where I think the programming that we've been discussing really started. In an anti-slavery pamphlet, interestingly enough, on page 114, individual said in 1680, it is well known that the Negroes do entertain a high thoughts of themselves and of their complexion as Europeans do. So there's this idea that they honor, recognize, and embrace the beauty within themselves. And then obviously he takes us to the leap towards the idea that African people must accept the correct conception of beauty. A beautiful body will always be more beautiful the wider it is. That was in 1764. And then many people probably know this concept of the slaveholders' philosophy. A body will be more superior the wider it is. An enslaved body will always be closer to the slaveholder the wider it is. This concept to keep, this color hierarchy where there's the house Negroes and then there's the field Negroes, and that was based upon color. When you were out of town for when you went back up to Seattle, I believe a few weeks ago, I had a message that encouraged individuals to look into the Willie Lynch letter, where he came up from the West Indies to Virginia because the slaves at that time, or the people who were captured and put in slavery, were revolting in major ways. And he came up from the West Indies to tell them how to rule the slaves. And this individual's name was Willie Lynch. And he basically said the way that you do it is you don't just enslave their bodies by way of do this, do that, but you enslave their minds. And the way you do this is to create this conflict dynamic within the racial group itself by way of making the white people superior, or the light people superior to the dark people. The ones with straight hair superior to the ones with kinky hair. The ones with shorter nose or more thinner noses, so, and then make men, dehumanize the men in front of the women. And then suddenly you're going to throw off this thing, and you will have them enslaved mentally, competing with themselves, where they will be easier to subject to the things that you are making them or forcing them to do. And that is, and he said this in 1700, I believe was when he, 1700s. He said, if you do this, you will enslave their mind for a minimum of 400 years.
How much of that is happening today?
That's what I mean.
That doesn't have even to do with race. Well, it can and does. That's one of the way it shows up. And I think I mean, how much are we just if we look at the the body of the United States, how divisive it is. Are we being enslaved if we're not awake enough right now, being enslaved to these ideas now? And I don't try to, I'm not making, I guess I'm trying to bring into under the idea of the Willie Lynch letter, what's happening in our country now.
Yeah, I mean, we seem to be at conflict with our fellow brothers and sisters. And in that particular, at least from my perception, prevents us from collectively working towards issues that are impacting us all on varying levels, but are creating the continuous inequity that many experience.
Yep.
And so we think of in these polar opposite fashions where I'm thinking, why can he think that way? Or why can't she or they think that way? I mean, don't they understand? And there's this, we're in this, under this umbrella, and we're completely unaware of everything else that is happening out
Yep.
there. It's a fascinating concept. I haven't thought about that.
I saw a Facebook interaction. I've got a love-hate relationship with Facebook, but I think I'm more entertained by it than anything. But it was about some folks that I know, and an idea was presented, and then this thread of like polar opposite ideas starts to emerge. And these are folks that would consider themselves, like spiritual beings having a human experience. It's just interesting to we want to jump on one side or the other.
Yes.
And that's that's like where we go right now.
Yeah.
So I'm committed to still being a reconciler. I'll have my opinion, but just not to live in the middle of the road. But to still have an opinion, reconcile, but also just be willing to listen and entertain somebody else's idea, whether I agree with it or not.
Yes. I totally agree. While for myself, also being willing to think critically.
Yes.
Things that I will say that I believe to be true.
Yes.
Not just accepting it because somebody who reflects my belief system says that that is the truth or that is factual, but to be able to think critically and suddenly recognize, wow, these two different systems, these two different wings are the same bird. Just I'm looking at different sides. It's like, so critical thinking is an important practice, regardless of how spiritual you think you are.
Amen. And correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there that knows birds way better than I do. I think it takes two wings to keep the bird afloat. Is that right? I mean, can the bird fly with only one wing?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a bird fly with only one wing? I don't know that I have.
No.
Does that happen?
I mean, in circles, kind of jumping on the ground, That's about
it. Not to make fun of the birds. Sorry, folks. Okay. Anyway, we're getting there. You want to?
Yeah, I'll touch upon this last one, and then I'll come back to one final
cool
message that we received here.
Cool.
So let's see. Let me pull that over there. This is the final slide, and it's kind of touching upon things we've touched upon. Biracial conversation, segregation, where the lighter people were segregated from the white folks, were also segregated from the dark folks. So there was this biracial conversation and segregation that existed that perpetuated or filled after the Emancipation Proclamation. Even so much so, W.E.B. Du Bois, he said that he had some interesting conversations about biracial individuals in his early experience and on page 117. But as he continued to gain more wisdom, he started recognizing that those were not accurate and they did not reflect what he truly believed to be true, and started aligning with those who he once may have seen as inferior. One thing that I underlined, the lighter the skin, the lighter the sentence. We see that in terms of incarceration. And then we touched upon both skin bleaching products and tanning, which are both the same thing, as he mentioned. You cannot be saying like, well, why is somebody bleaching their skin while there's a person laying out by the pool to get darker? You know what I mean? It's two sides of the same coin, just different experiences from different people.
Yep.
And I thought that was an interesting idea. So
I think it's fascinating too, Jeffon, that in India they're called, here we are for the one time today, all right, fairness creams. $200 million in sales in 2014.
Yes. Yes.
Wild.
And he mentions that somebody who shared that isn't that there in China and Africa. In Nigeria, it's also a huge thing. In Jamaica, in the Caribbean, it's a huge thing.
Yep.
So there was one comment, and then we can kind of wrap it up, Rev Charles. But
cool.
Let's see. Render asks, can we really force or reprogram ourselves to be attracted to someone, to something we currently aren't? I know people who are more attracted to tall people and vice versa. Some are attracted to dark skin, thin people, while others are attracted to light skin, heavyset people. I'm talking about sexual attraction to find a mate. Does this apply to the current topic?
I don't think we're talking about attraction. I think we're talking about equity.
Equity.
Yep.
Yes.
We're talking about opportunity, not attraction. I mean, people like you ask, do I have a type? You know, like, who am I attracted to a particular type of person? And I'm really not. I'm attracted to if I'm attracted to them, I'm attracted to the person that's in front of me because I'm physically attracted to them in whatever way I am. There's the biology of it. There's character, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but I think in the context of this commenter, I would say, yeah, we're not talking about reprogramming ourselves to be attracted to somebody.
Yeah.
In a sexual way, in a biological way. We're talking about judging somebody by the content of their character, essentially. Yeah. What do you think, Jeffon?
Yeah. I mean, we're really talking about this idea of in what ways do we preferentially treat somebody a different way based upon the color of their skin, and or completely ignore, avoid somebody based upon the complexion that they show up with, and how can we begin to resolve that within our mind to create a more inclusive, equitable, and equal type of experience for all of us.
Right on.
And we gotta thank you guys, by the way. You're doing a great job explaining a concept that is far too often expressed with vitriol online. Well, thank you for being here and sharing your comments and questions and suggestions.
We do the vitriol offline, and then we get here and we behave ourselves.
Yeah. Stay on after. Once we close this down,
that's right. The after show is where we really get into it.
Yeah. Well, that's why Rev Charles has about 8 different burner accounts, so he can just spew.
Oh, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Don't we call this our 10 a.m. show? It's a show.
Yeah, right.
You know what I love is that we're all here doing it. The reason you folks are tuning in is because you're committed to growing as well, and I love that. And I know I am, and I know Jeffon is, and that's what we're up to. And I love bringing some lightness to it as well, because it is heavy. You know, it is. There are people that suffer, that actually and obviously die because of the color of their skin. And it's time to wake up. We got to do better, and we are doing better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Closing thoughts, Jeffon? You want to wrap it up and bring it home?
Yeah, well, maybe this is another opportunity to carry these concepts with us into the week ahead and begin to recognize ways that we may just even in our own mind think of people based upon the complexion of their skin. And not saying that you completely ignore somebody, but being attentive and mindful of those feelings and emotions and thoughts that begin to surface when you're around certain groups of people, and then taking it a step further and asking why, or where are those things rooted within myself? And as Adair said, this concept of otherness, how can we begin to kind of release this concept of otherness and begin to honor this concept of oneness and realize that what we see in another person is often a mere reflection of ourselves. And there's something we despise, don't like, don't agree with in another individual. There's probably some unresolved things we need to begin to heal, nurture, or honor inside of ourselves. So I think that's a good place.
Amen. I'm with you. Well, that wraps it up for this week, gang, for today and for our exploration this week. Next week is chapter 10, and I think it's called White. Yes. Is that right?
Yes, yep. I'm looking forward to this chapter.
Yeah. Me too.
I don't know why you're laughing at me, Rev Charles. No.
Because I'm white. Caucasian.
Caucasian.
I love working with you, my brother. It's special. I'm grateful.
As are you. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's see. We continue to appreciate your financial support of our center gang. There's a contribution button there in the feed, someplace on your screen. It supports our work, everything that we're up to at the center, with the building, with our staff. I know I say the same thing every day, but it rings true every day. So I say it with renewed vigor every day, with renewed purpose every day. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And to remind you, tomorrow, I think we've got the Sensational Six with our new reverends. And then Thursday is part 2 of my conversation with Charles Holt, the wonderful Charles Holt. More stories to come as we get into his career. And then the week rolls on. So that's what we're up to. Everybody have an awesome Tuesday, Jeffon. Have a magnificent Tuesday. Much love to your wife, to your family.
Thank you.
Yeah. And God bless you. We'll see everybody soon. Have a beautiful day. Make today best day ever. Peace and love.
Peace and blessings.